if you're going to take pictures and spend all your time in Photoshop, you might as well just be a graphic designer. So I think the key thing is if you're able to take pictures and be able to show it right on the fly, show what you're producing, that defines what a good photographer is.
Welcome to Critical Thinking Required, hosted by LBW. This podcast is intended for free thinkers, entrepreneurs, and knowledge seekers. Join us as we discuss relevant financial topics, explore with guests their financial journeys, and engage with experts in industries such as space, media and entertainment, real estate, and many more. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Welcome to Critical Thinking Required. You're with your hosts, Tim Bickmore, and my two colleagues, Nathaniel Leach and Dan Weiss. And today we have a guest, Francis Sun. Francis, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Before we get started into some questions, I'm going to read read to our listeners / viewers bio of yours so we can get you introduced. And then from there, I think it looks like Dan's up to bat today, so we'll get him to start asking some questions. So Francis Sun is a Chicago-based photographer who works in commercial photography and corporate / nonprofit events. He started his career working as a media photographer and has been photographing for publications and PR companies since 2008. In addition to photography, he has started to do video work and production for virtual events. Francis, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Dan, do you want to start us off with some questions today?
It'd be my pleasure. It's been a long time since I've had a chance to ask Francis some questions. So, Francis, basic, but I know it's not basic. Can you, in your opinion, talk about what makes a good photographer?
Yeah, sure. I think in today's world, a lot of people have access to cameras, and whether it be the phone or a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. I think the most important thing about being a photographer is just understanding how lighting works. I feel like a lot of people just feel like you can put the camera in like an automatic mode, but there's so many more elements to just being a photographer. Sometimes it's you have to be able to voice your opinion on when you need to fix someone's headshot or portrait, or if they're doing a fashion shoot, if they need to make moves. But the thing is, with all of that, you have to know how to light it. If you don't know how to light it, I think an old photographer, a friend of mine, said to me once, his name David Anthony, and he said to me, if you're going to take pictures and spend all your time in Photoshop, you might as well just be a graphic designer. So I think the key thing is if you're able to take pictures and be able to show it right on the fly, show what you're producing, that defines what a good photographer is, because you've taken the time to understand lighting. Doesn't matter if you have the most expensive camera or whether you're using an iPhone, but there are certain cameras you need for certain jobs, but you shouldn't depend on your equipment to take good photos. Your equipment is just a tool.
Great answer. In all of these years you've been doing this now, I'm guessing like you didn't wake up someday and just be like, lighting, I get it. That probably took some years of perfection. Can you talk about how you've kind of, zoned in on that skill and how that's developed over time?
Yeah. Well, before I was a photographer, I was working in IT, and I was doing photography on the side. And I think learning how to do event photography really taught me lighting fast, because you're always in different kind of situations. So always have to carry a flash, and just reading books about lighting. There's plenty of books, materials to read out there that can explain how light works. Even when I was learning how to use studio lighting, I was like, do I need one light? Do I need three lights? I've learned most of the time I'm running with one or two lights, and I'm usually good enough. And when I'm on the go for events, it's just a flash, and it's just literally what's the thing is, a lot of people today is, you take pictures and then you can look at the result on your camera. You can look at it on the computer, taking the time to go reviewing the pictures. And if something doesn't come out, figure out why. I remember I photographed a festival once, and the camera was taking the pictures fast enough, but they were a little blurry because I figured out the shutter speed wasn't fast enough. And a lot of people don't understand. They just look at their picture and like, why is it blurry? I've seen this on all the time threads. Like people are like, why is this blurry? Why is this blurry? And they don't even take the time to understand the terminology of what shutter speed or things like that. And if you don't learn, and that's just basic math. I was gonna say that it's just that the fact that we have the ability to review our pictures makes it easier, and sometimes people don't take the time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So why go through all that effort if you're not going to complete it perfectly, that full circle? Would you mind sharing a bit as to where you find your inspiration and perhaps how that may filter into how you would define your style, what that looks like?
Okay. I found my inspiration when working in media, because when I worked for I used to work for, my initial start in this whole business was Chicago Scene magazine. And when I worked for them, I had to photograph so many different events, and it taught me a skill that I kind of didn't expect as a photographer, and that's learning to talk to random people. And you don't like you it's a weird skill to have, because it's like when you have like a big corporate event and you have to go talk to, hey, that's the CEO of some company, we need his photo. I can go up to them, and then somehow I'm just used to just talking to people, because when I worked for Chicago Scene, my job was to go to all these nightclubs and just meet random people and ask lots of people to take their picture. And then I had to do stuff for media where we'd have celebrities and stuff. And a lot of these photos required fast turnaround times. I think I find my inspiration in just the hustle of doing it fast. Like there's so many times that I have to shoot pictures. Like for instance, I have to shoot the James Beard Awards every year at the red carpet for James Beard Foundation, and they need the photos by the next day at noon. And I think it's that hustle that is my inspiration. It's kind of like my style. And just learning how to just take good photos and letting people review their pictures when I do their portraits for Chicago Magazine.
Francis, do you find that spontaneous nature of the way that you like to work, does that get drawn into the photographs that you take?
To a certain degree, I think it does. It's just that I've just been doing it so long that it's kind of like I just know how to set up my lighting. I know how to set up. I've done so many portraits and headshots, and setting up and doing the picture that's probably definitely relevant. But the thing that makes it, one thing that has evolved for me nowadays is taking the time to review a picture. If someone doesn't like something, I listen. Like if I do a doctor's headshot or a dentist headshot or somebody's, and they don't like the word the collars fixed or something like that, something I always tell my clients is, please honestly give me feedback. I'm not a mind reader. And letting them review and make those adjustments, that's the part where I've learned to take time, and that's something that I've learned how to do over time.
Very interesting. I can relate, Francis, when it comes to trying to explain how you do something that you do day in and day out, and then trying to then break it down for people like us who have no idea what's going on. It's very fascinating to hear you speak to that. I can relate in my line of work. So my question for you is, you not only do work in fashion photography, but you also do, as you mentioned, a number of other commercial photography scenes, yes, so to speak. So yeah. I was curious, how does fashion photography compare to everything else that you do, and contrast, compare and contrast? What would you say is the common thread amongst all of those, and then what is so distinct amongst them all as well?
Well, with fashion photography, it's because I like to do commercial work. If I have a client that wants to photograph their clothing line, and I have, like, my living room is set up as a photography studio, that's the kind of demographic of clients I want to work with. Like when you do fashion photography, when you do fashion photography for like a company, you're showing their products off, and you also have to have someone that can really move. It's just marketing material, and it's stuff that they use on their website to advertise their clothing. The reason this comes in my line of work is because That's all I want to do, like commercial related work. If someone's getting married, I have no interest in doing that. But I would shoot a bridal line. I'll shoot a model in a bridal line, and it takes a lot of work to do that. And I think the thing I love about fashion photography, it's taking the time to do the hair, take the makeup, planning out all the looks, planning out where we're gonna do it. And I'm the one who's in charge of that. And it's something I really enjoy, working with other people, because I think the thing is, when you're as a photographer, a lot of the times you work alone. I mean, I could have an assistant, but if I already know how to set up the lighting myself, I'm just going to do it. And honestly, with COVID times, it's not really exactly easy to just say, hey, I need a staff of like 30 people. But everyone's getting vaccinated, and that's hopefully, I can actually start getting back to work. But yeah, fashion. And the other thing is, when you the thing I appreciate working with fashion photography is when you have a model that actually knows how to move. So that way we're not spending 30 minutes or 40 minutes trying to get a few looks down. We probably spend more time on hair and makeup and then shoot within 15 minutes, and we can go on to the next look, because they just know how to move and make the product marketable.
It's detailed and efficient.
Oh yeah.
So I got a couple of follow-ups here. One, so Ying that Dan mentioned is also my wife. And so I'm just going to stick this in here because she edits this, and I'm going to earn some suck-up points here. Maybe she'll keep it in, maybe she won't. But she told me that back in the day, when she was in, I think it was high school or college, she did some modeling, actually, for some friends of hers in school who were working towards the photography fashion arena. Yep. And she told me about her experience, just as you described, about the appropriate ways to move. But what other kind of challenges do you encounter running your business within this kind of industry? Are there any? Is there anything that in particular jumps out, simply just due to the nature of the commercial photography industry or the fashion photography industry?
Yeah, and probably the biggest hassle is always probably the toughest part is negotiating rates. It is the hardest thing to work out with clients. And what you find over years, after doing this for many years, you have to find people that actually want to hire you for you. See, something I learned when I used to be a network administrator and fixing computers. If your computer breaks and someone fixes it, whether it be your best friend or your Best Buy, Geek Squad, or your IT guy from your company fixes the computer, you get the same result. And you know what? Probably the best idea is to do the cheapest and fastest. Well, go to the person that's going to do the job fast and be cost effective. With photography, it's not like that. If I do headshots versus the way Dan does headshots are completely different things. You get two different results, and you need to find people that value your work and not just your rate. A perfect example I heard, imagine if someone was making your website and they charge $5,000, but they can get your website done in 2 weeks. But then there's this other web designer who have the website done in 3 months, but he's only $3,000. Is that, why should you be penalized because you can do a job well in an efficient manner? You shouldn't. And sometimes I deal with that. I'll do commercial photography and I'll be quoting someone $300 an hour for interior photos, and they can tell I'll get someone responding, well, I have so and so, they'll do it for $100 an hour. Well, I'm not so and so, and I also need 1 hour, and that person will quote 4 hours. Well, why should I be penalized because I can do the job quicker? That's why my rate is what it is. And I realistically know what I am capable of doing in an hour, just because I've just had plenty of experience in this industry. And sometimes it's just educating your clients.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, we definitely see some of that, and we see that in a lot of different industries, right? We see that in construction with people that are bidding and not sure how to piece that. I'm sure again over time you've probably, as you've built up your book, built the confidence and the know-how to know this is what I should be priced at. But it probably didn't start that way, and I'm guessing a lot of your peers struggle with that. I mean, we see a lot of times there's the technical elements of what you do, and then there's running a business, and
Oh yeah.
those things can be, they're very different. They can contrast, they can conflict quite a bit. So it's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, I'm guessing, right? That's been some time probably since you've kind of built up the ability to say, this is what I'm worth. This is why. It probably didn't start that way though. How did you get to that point? Right? Because now you probably can command that.
Right.
But 14 years ago when you started, that probably was a different story, right?
Very different story. The first and foremost thing is you gotta be willing to like, this is where I'm saying about it's the hustle that I love, and building the relationships that you build. When you start out, like first of all, when you go to, I never finished college, so unfortunately, if anyone's that wasn't exactly a requirement, but based on what I hear from people that have gone to school for photography, they teach you about style, they taught you about history, you know, but they don't talk to you about running a business. And you learn that running a business is a totally different element.
Mhm.
And it's probably why a lot of photographers struggle. A lot of times I talk to people and I'll be like, what's your rate? And they're like, I don't know, it depends on the job. And I think a lot of times you get people, yeah. So you don't go to school for, like, a lot of people that are fresh photographers. They don't. They're new to this industry, and you have to get your name out. You have to get your name out. You have to get people to know you. You can't just be like, I'm 300 an hour, and this is because of why. And so sometimes it's taking on smaller jobs or learning to do your craft well with your friends or your clients. Like, I used to do stuff for urbandaddy.com, and we did new restaurants all the time, and they didn't pay a lot. Chicago Scene Magazine didn't pay a lot, but it paid something. It became really when I started working for Chicago Scene Magazine. I remember they opened up a new bar called Bull and Bear way back when, and when I went there, I was like, "Hi, I'm for Chicago Scene Magazine," and the guy's like, "Oh, Francis, just get in there," and I'm like, wait, how does he know my name? What happens without you knowing it is sometimes people started to know who I was, and I didn't expect that. I always expected to be, I'm behind the scenes. You don't really get to, you don't exactly, photographers aren't exactly the most extroverted people. We don't exactly say, hey, let's go. I've met a lot of successful photographers that are very introverted. And it took another photographer to tell me, like, you're very extroverted. I'm like, why? Because I just went up and talked to them. And I've just been doing this for so long. I had to learn how to be a social person because of working in the bar club scene. But the point I'm saying is this. It's just something you have to do with hard work. You sometimes working for a magazine and small publication, even with fashion photography, the model agency I work with, it's because I shot fashion shows in New York for Fashion Week, and sometimes my friends' models were in the shows, and I just sent her copies of the photos, you know. And it just takes time. I think what it really just does is willing to learn and get to know the other people in this industry, and really just get your name out there, and always do good work.
It's interesting, Francis. You mentioned, not going to school for photography and not finishing school, like you mentioned. And there's a gentleman who I listen to quite often just on podcasts and some of the things he puts out. And he talks a lot about business school and how business schools with case studies are just case studies and they're nothing more. And the only way to truly learn is to actually start a business, because that's when you're actually going to understand the nuances that come with business. He says, you can read about it all day, you can talk about it, but until you actually do it, that's when you start learning. So he's like, start a lemonade stand first, and then you'll start understanding the nuances of business to really understand the case studies. So it's very interesting. I mean, I think you're saying that in a very nice way of like, there's only so many things that you can do until you actually just put hard work in and start the business and start going through the industry.
Yeah.
I am curious, and you kind of hit on it a little bit with Dan, but I want to dig a little deeper. everybody has access to a camera. Like you said, everyone has access to different kinds of technology. But can you tell me at your level, what sets apart like an excellent photography, maybe something that you look up to or whatever, versus someone else? Like, what is the defining factor? Is it truly just the lighting, or what really brings it to another level, in your opinion? Like the artistic side of it, I'm curious about.
It's two things. One, you have to take good photos. It's part of the job. If you don't know how to take good photos, learn. And everything is learnable. All of this is learnable. The second thing is communication. I could take the greatest photo of somebody, but if my client doesn't like it and he doesn't give me that feedback, or I don't show him proofs, I might come home with 50 pictures of one subject, and then I send him the proof gallery the next day, and then he's like, well, I don't like this. That's why I review. So I review on site, so that way we can adjust those changes, address those problems right then and there. But the thing is, it's the fact that you have to be willing to communicate. You have to kind of be willing to, you have to show your work, and that's not exactly that's not exactly the easiest thing. Some people I know that will never let anyone review any of the pictures until after they've done all the work on it. Well, then you kind of got a graphic designer that's kind of trying to use a camera and that's a failure in communication. You know what I mean? Or just scheduling when you're doing all these headshots, or giving some direction on somebody and trying to make them feel comfortable on how to smile and stuff.
Interesting communication. I love it. I love that. That's actually really good insight. I never would have thought about that from a photography standpoint. We talk about this a lot, and we get a lot of questions recently. And I'm curious from you is, what do you see as the greatest reward from your work?
The greatest reward from my work is just producing stuff that having clients that are just happy to use, they're happy with my work, and so they continue to use me again and again. I think the COVID was a really, really hard time, and it's probably been one of the slowest seasons I'm just getting back into shooting events again, and getting second vaccine shot on May 4th and Star Wars Day. And a lot of my clients are still calling me now once they're getting back to events. That's the big, I think, having loyal customers that are loyal to you because of they like how you do your job. That's what that's probably the best feeling. That's the biggest reward for me.
Francis, before I give my last kind of thought here, which I'm going to put together, I just want to say that if you're ever looking for a runway model,
yeah,
I will happily pay $300 an hour if you give Nathaniel the offer to be a runway model. I would just die to see that. But seriously, I really appreciate all the insight here, and particularly, I mean, the tips on the lighting and so on is fantastic, because we're in a world where everyone picks up an iPhone, thinks they're a pro, and that has nothing to do with that component, nor does the communication piece. So I really appreciate that. But I really enjoy the part of just walking through, like, what it's like to not finish school, but work your way into the industry, which is a totally different path. But just understanding things like pricing and how you've got to start somewhere, but at some point in time too, that balance has to occur where it's like, I did my time, and I earned some stripes here, and I put up with it. And because of that, I'm better. And so I'm worth it to command X, Y, and Z. I just completely respect that. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that that's so relatable, not just in photography, but a lot of the different industries and professionals that we see across the country.
Yeah. And Francis, I guess for my final thoughts, what I love about it is the hustle. Like what you just explained right there is just the hustle and the grind of being a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, and reading, educating yourself, getting better, tinkering with your skill sets. And it's great, and it's a lot of experience, and it's a lot of learning. And the other thing too that I think you hit it on the head, which so many businesses can relate, is communication. I love that that's part of being a good photographer, is how to communicate, because it's a fundamental skill, but not everybody's the greatest at it. And being vulnerable enough to show your product up front, right? That is a vulnerable spot for an individual. Being critiqued right there and then, and being able to communicate that, saying, hey, and then being confident in your work regardless. I just really appreciate those thoughts. And again, thank you so much for joining us. It was really nice to hear. But Nathaniel, you got any thoughts for us?
Yeah, I want to echo what Tim just said about communication. I think that I too am an introvert more so than an extrovert. And it's taken me years to get comfortable speaking to other people. These two guys can attest to that in the spades. So I know how difficult that can be. And I think kudos to you for being able to step up to the plate and be able to get outside of your comfort zone. So do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share, Francis?
I think the other thing though is with photography, there's so many kinds of it. There's so many different, there's food photography, there's interiors, there's real estate, there's weddings, there's corporate. Anyone that really wants to be a photographer, I think the most important thing is you got to find something you enjoy doing. There are a lot of people that there's nothing wrong with the wedding business. I just had a bad experience a long time ago doing a friend's wedding. And this wasn't when I was kind of more of doing this as a side job. And then that lack of appreciation was like, this is not the demographic I want to be around. And so that's because of that reason, I stay away from wedding photography. Money is good in wedding photography, but it's not what I want to do. And I think if I went down that path, I may not be still doing photography. I learned being an IT guy is, if you haven't tell, I kind of like computers. When I worked as an IT guy, I was miserable. I was getting yelled at by the CEO or the partner of some company because their computer was broken. And I had nothing to do with it breaking. And it kind of made me not like to be around computers as much. So getting up, finding something that you actually enjoy in photography, find something you love doing. If you love fashion photography, work your way up, assist for some photographer, learn how a shoot goes, read a book about lighting, and make connections. But, you have to find something that you're passionate about before you're just like, I'm going to do this for the next 10 years. Cause you might look at this like what I know plenty of people that have given up photography completely because they prefer working a day job, and that's fine. It's not for everybody.
Francis, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your lens with us. It was very insightful, and it was wonderful to see you after many years of not seeing you. So, so thank you again for this perspective, and thank you to our audience for always tuning in. And we greatly appreciate you following our podcasts. We wish you a great night. Take care of yourself. Until next time.
Thank you for taking the time to start your journey of thinking differently and listening to LBW talk about stuff they love. Until next time.